Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Robert Butler. I'm the host of Sportsskope. Welcome to Sportsskope. Just wanted to make an announcement here. This is for the first time broadcasting my first episode on a podcast, and that will be on the SoundCloud app. I will hopefully, pending technical difficulties, be able to put this as another option to my Facebook fans and, of course, my other social media fans, Twitter followers. And okay, now I'm officially on the SoundCloud app here. I'm recording here on my SoundCloud app. Today is April 7th, 2017, recording for Sportsskope. Today I've got a lot to talk about, but let me talk about what happened last week. As I've mentioned for several weeks in a row here on Sportsskope, working on a lot of maintenance issues. Do want to make an announcement. Sometime later next month, we will have Sportsskope.com launched. It's been a website that's been in the making for several months now. It's over my pay grade as far as the technical part of it. And very difficult. One of the reasons why I didn't have a show last week, bought myself a printer, had some technical difficulties. I will admit that I am a millennial who is not as tech savvy as I should be. I apologize. I bought the printer from Best Buy. Had issues with it for a few hours, took it back to the whole Geek Squad. I bought the service there, which I recommend. Anyone, if you can afford that service. It seemed like I got a deal on it for like $100, and I paid it all up front. I bought that last year when I bought this laptop for my show. I bought that at Best Buy during the tax-free thing here in Nashville, for those kids coming back to school and whatnot. I think it was in the last month of July. I recommend getting that service. They didn't pay me to say that. I'm just telling you. So, forgive me for that last week. Got a lot I want to talk about this week. I know that the Final Four is going on. I know we got the Masters next week. But the biggest sport that makes all the revenue is the NFL, and that's what I want to base my show around. I will cover other sports topics and big stories and breaking news and all that good stuff, but the NFL is the king, everybody. So that's what I want to lead my story off with. And I will say this, now that I'm in this part of the business, sometimes when I hear things on sports talk during the week, for instance, such as Russell Wilson wanting to be the highest paid player in the NFL, and he's wanting to give the Seattle Seahawks a deadline of tax day, April 15th, for them to make a offer. Now, he didn't say or else as far as I'm going to hold out, but he has made that. My initial assumption was, for one thing, there's a lot of rumor that's been going out. Colin Cowherd's mentioned this through sources that that his wife Sierra, famous R&B singer, is wanting to move to New York to possibly leverage his way to the Giants, for instance. That is said to be just rumor. After doing my research, I realized that Wilson is a much better quarterback than I originally thought he was stat-wise. His stats line up with the Ben Roethlisberger. And I looked at the big jumps in the cap space, and it's not that much to say it's okay to pay this guy. I've got the stats. I'm going to go over this real quick. So that's what I'm going to start off my show with. I'm going to talk about the AAF demise and who should really be to blame. I'm going to talk about also the NFL pass interference rule. I'm going back from last week. I'm trying to do 2 weeks in one here. The underratedness of Bruce Pearl, and why you should sell yourself in life on image. How you dress and networking is huge. I don't know if anybody saw the story that John Calipari got a lifetime contract and he accepted that from the University of Kentucky to stay their basketball coach when there was an offer being floated around for the UCLA to hire him away. I'll talk about that too. But first, let's get to this Russell Wilson thing. I think it's interesting. Like I said, the NFL is king. We've got the draft coming up in a few weeks right out here in my hometown here in Nashville. Okay. All of you who's talking against Russell Wilson, me being one of those people, Kevin, he plays on the left coast. He does not get the after I did the research on this, he does just not get the love that he should. Remember, everybody, he was a third-round draft pick and not expected to play when he first came to the. He was expected really drafted to be a backup. He was a starter his rookie year. The rest is history. They go to the Super Bowl a few years later. They demolish the Denver Broncos. They go again, and a few years later, and lose a 1-yard game to the infamous non-handoff play that they lost to the Patriots. So let's go over this. He tells Jimmy Fallon, and I thought this was shocking, but now after looking into it, it's not that big a deal. Going back about a week and a half, tells Jimmy Fallon he wants to be the highest paid player in NFL history. And he gave tax day April 15th to get that. I was looking at some of his, look at his stats here, really. I printed this out on this printer, knock on wood, it did work. 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions last year. 2017 with virtually no offensive line. 34 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 21 and 11 and 16. That was the worst offensive line. 1 year, he led his team in rushing and passing. Okay? Let's go look at Ben Roethlisberger, a player who I thought who was infinitely better than Russell Wilson. By the way, I'm going to go over NFL contracts of quarterbacks. I've got this printed off. And the numbers aren't that bad, guys. This is not a heart attack moment, okay? Ben Roethlisberger last year, 34 and 16. He had twice as many interceptions as Wilson. Wilson's team made the playoffs. We can all make the argument that the Pittsburgh Steelers had much more offense, even without Le'Veon Bell. Had a much better team and a scheme around them. And I can say this because I've said this on previous. You guys can go back and look this up. They got 3 former or current all-pro players on the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line. And he still had twice as many interceptions, he being Ben Roethlisberger. Their numbers are almost identical other than that. This guy had 7 picks. And they made the playoffs. Remember, they lost to Dallas in the playoffs. So, a lot of you on these national shows saying it's crazy to pay this guy, and I will be one of them. Here's a look at the quarterbacks that are the highest paid in the NFL. Number 1, Aaron Rodgers, $33 million. Matt Ryan, $30 million. Kirk Cousins with his new guaranteed deal, $84 million. $28 a year, $28 annually. $27.5 for Jimmy Garoppolo. Matt Stafford, $27. Derek Carr, $25. Drew Brees, $25. Andrew Luck, $24.5. A lot of you thought that was crazy talk. Me being one of those people. Tom Brady, annual salary, way down below Cam Newton and Phillip Rivers at $20.5 million, 3 consecutive Super Bowls. That was going to be my take coming into this argument, everybody, that Tom Brady, with the consecutive Super Bowls, 3 consecutive Super Bowls, 2 wins, and he's making $20.5. But look who else was in the NFC Championship game. Drew Brees at 25. Andrew Luck was in the playoffs at 24.5. Matt Ryan didn't miss the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers, that is another story I could have got into today. I've said this time and time again. Him and Mike McCarthy had been coaching him for 13 years. Both of them had a story dogging one another out. It simply got too stale. It went past the 10-year mark. Here's the thing about Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers. I know a lot of you saying, yeah, $33 million for that argument. They made the playoffs for 8 consecutive years. So these salaries are not that. It's the most important position. This guy gave you a hometown discount, Russell Wilson. Like I said, he's on an $84 million. Right now, currently, he's not even, okay, he's currently making $21.9. He's on the back. He will be a free agent in 2020. Basically, this is his contract year. I know the celebrity wife is getting into his head. Yes, Brady should be the highest paid. Brady is married to a woman making $300 million a year. I would make Brady the highest paid because they don't really have any superstars other than their head coach. But my point here is, I gave you those names. Now look at this. This is blow your minds. The NFL salary cap, everybody. (2019) it's 188.2. 2018 177.2. 2017 167.2. 2015 155.27. $10 million a year average, it goes up. So look at that. The other side of this argument is Russell Wilson has had his head beat in at times with arguably, going back a few years, the league's worst offensive line. So if you want to go there, the money is there for the cap. The cap is going up every year. How many years, the people who listen to this stuff, me being one of those people that listen to sports talk, I'm a carrier. I drive 12 to 14 and a half hours a day, closer to the 14 and a half than the 12 of people talking about quarterback salary. We know it's the most important position in all of sports. Okay? The cap's going up. We also know that Drew Brees at one time had an outstanding contract that he's down to $25 million. The highest paid is Aaron Rodgers at $33.5. Now these are newly signed. Now you can look at Matt Ryan, $30 million. He was in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. So going back 3 years. You got to draft right. The cap is going up $10 million a year. It's the most important position in sports. So I look at this from two different angles. If I'm Seattle, I could say, we know, okay, by the way, he will be 31 this year. I want to say he's 30 years, he'll be 31. We got guys playing. He doesn't take hard hits. He was a former baseball player. He's got the baseball slide down to a science. He plays for a defensive-minded head coach. We don't know if he can run a West Coast system. I think he could run a West Coast offense, which is mainly a bunch of short passes. This guy's very intelligent. He's been a team player. He took a lot of flack from his teammates that played primarily on the defensive side of the ball and stood in like a soldier. So you look at this and you say to yourself, I can trust this guy. I couldn't trust Le'Veon Bell. He failed 2 drug tests and been suspended. I can't really trust a guy like Antonio Brown who goes on Facebook Live after a playoff game and exposes your coach like that without nobody's permission. $84 million was guaranteed to Kirk Cousins. If I'm Seattle, I'll tell him, we want to make you the highest guaranteed, $74 million guaranteed to Jimmy Garoppolo. I would say, how about 90 guaranteed, and we put you, he is currently at $21 million. We'll put you in the top 5 at, say, $27.5. Matt Stafford, very, very rarely in the playoffs. You make more than him annually. You have the most guaranteed contract. If he comes back and says, I want to be, for ego purposes, I want to make more than Aaron Rodgers at 33.5. And if he does that, we're going to come back and say, okay, if you do that, it's going to be very difficult to put a good team. We're going to have to hit home runs. And remember, Drew Brees went to a long period before the general manager had the offensive player of the year, rookie of the year, and the defense. They had to go that far because their cap was so jacked up. Now, you got the salary cap on your side. But if you want to be, just for ego purposes, have the biggest number, that's the consequences. But it will not break Seattle if they did it. But if I'm Seattle, the guy I can trust. I know he's going to show up at work every day. He's not failed drug tests. He's a team player. So we'll make you the most guaranteed. I would do that, and I would not blank if I'm Pete Carroll than the general manager. But tell him, if you want him, for ego purposes, if you want that 33.6 to be ahead of Aaron Rodgers, here's the consequences. Aaron Rodgers did not make the playoffs. His coach got fired. Matt Stafford's up there. Jimmy Garoppolo, Kirk Cousins. None of those guys made the playoffs last year. Derek Carr's below them. But you're going to have more guaranteed than any player in NFL history. We'll give you 90 guaranteed. I think that would be suitable. Now, the flip side is they could probably get 2 to you could probably get 3 to 4, maybe 5 first-round picks for the guy. To me, I feel like Seattle's probably over a barrel in this situation because a lot of people really don't want to play in Seattle. It's on the other coast. So you really can't sell marketing there like you can everywhere else. So I think I would offer the guy the most guaranteed contract and give him a healthy signing bonus that tops everybody else, 35 to 37 mil signing bonus, and give him the most guaranteed money. I don't think that's saying too much. Quite frankly, I think Russell Wilson would probably take that. And if he wants the extra, we'll say we had to do. We can probably pay the extra and put it on incentives that do not count against the cap. A lot of Brady gets paid for playing in extra games, for extra snaps. You get record incentives that do not count against the cap. So that's my take on that. The guy is even. He's played in 2 Super Bowls. I know that Ben Roethlisberger has won 2 Super Bowls and played in 3, but you can make the argument that he is right there with Ben Roethlisberger. These are the numbers, everybody. I didn't know the numbers were that good because he does play in Seattle, because I don't get to see all the games. I do watch them on Red Zone, but I don't watch every single snap that the guy plays on. If they play on Sunday Night Football, barely see the whole game. But my point is, if push came to shove, I would pay him. They draft pretty well. Pete Carroll drafts well. Because remember, Pete Carroll had a lot of 6-10, a lot of 7-9 thing, that deal going on before Russell Wilson got there. So all this Legion of Bloom, Earl Thomas, and Sherman, and remember, Marshawn Lynch was a cast-off from Buffalo, everybody, before he became a star in Seattle. So, overall, like I said, I didn't have this take until I broke down the numbers. So, if I'm his agent, I'm going to say, ain't you right there with Ben Roethlisberger? I mean, this guy led your team in rushing and passing. So, definitely want to pay him. Staying with the NFL. Trying to see if I have anything else on the guy. Okay, pass interference. Like I said, I'm about a week and a half behind everybody. A lot of the national people had an issue with this. They also had issue with the helmet-to-helmet that went into play last year. Oh my God, you're never going to get a game stop. Games are going to be decided on helmet-to-helmet. I've rarely seen anything from it. A lot of the old school people, when replay first came into effect, this is a bang-bang league. It's going to be terrible. It's going to last too long. I used when the coach throws the flag, I usually use that opportunity to go to the restroom. 2 minutes is over. It was a catch. It was not a catch. First down. And it's the same rule, by the way, everybody. If you win one, you get one back. You have 2 for the game. You could possibly have 3 challenges. It's no big deal. And by the way, 31-1, the owners voted for replay. You know, I like the NFL for this. I wanted to say this, and I didn't write this down on my original notes, but I was thinking about this last week. NFL has one issue in a playoff game. They make a change. In 2009, in a playoff game, when Minnesota lost the toss, and New Orleans, ironically, New Orleans went all the way down the field, kicked a field goal to win the game. They changed the overtime rule, and everybody got mad about it, and yada, yada, yada. There were statistics done that the winner of the coin toss wins 58 to 60% of the time. So it wasn't a big deal. The other team gets the ball back. They have a chance to score. If they cannot score that field goal, it's over. If you score a touchdown on that one, obviously you win the game. If you run the kickoff back, you win the game. Same thing with this deal. It's not going to be that big a deal. Pass interference is still pass interference. If you're playing the ball and not the person, it's going to go, what about Hail Marys? What about a Hail Mary? Hail Mary is nothing but a jump ball. All these national people are making a big deal out of this. And I'm just saying right now, it's nothing more but a jump ball situation. They're still going to call it the same. They're not going to call pass interference on a jump ball. It's a jump ball. You're all going for the ball. Why would it be any different? I think that this is. I think the NFL will call it conservatively. If it gets challenged and you're doing it in super slow mo, that was a pass interference. I know that the issue came out about the other pass interference in the New Orleans game in the regular season that cost Pittsburgh the game. I get that. A lot of people were talking about that as well. Hey, just get the right call. I'm a coach. Just, play the ball. You still got the 5-yard rule. You can jam your receivers up on the 5-yard rule. It's not that big a deal. The NFL always gets it right. And here's the thing, everybody. Right. Thanks, Kevin. Exactly. Leader in pass interference, running seriously, just pay him and let him go. Right. That's right, Carlos. Oh, by the way, I don't know, Carlos, if I lost you or not, but the Giants were rumored to be one of those teams interested in Russell Wilson, his wife wanting to get her career going in New York. I know that I'm going to talk about Josh Rosen in a bit. It reminds me of the Jay Cutler situation, but there would be no hesitation. That 6th pick would be Seattle's, along with another first-round pick and a player if they wanted it for Russell Wilson. But that's a different story. That's all speculation at this point, going back to the Russell Wilson story. But, the pass interference, like I said, it's not that. Here's the thing. NFL, it's not like baseball. Baseball still rejected the pitch clock when they're doing it in the minor leagues. They're old and rigid. That's why baseball's falling behind and not a national sport, and the NFL is still leading the way. Part of it is because their quickness to adapt and change on the fly, their salary cap situations, and the way they handle business is why the NFL is and will remain king. So that's all I have to say about that. By the way, think about it if you had it in basketball. I made a note. What if Bruce Pearl and Auburn had it to challenge that travel play, huh? Go figure. They're not in the championship game. Play with a clear head. Play the right way. Let the best team win. Let's get it all right. It's not that serious, everybody. Speaking of Josh Rosen, okay. There is a theory out there about Josh Rosen and Cliff Kingsbury having this conversation in private. We're just trying to get trade bait for the first overall pick. We're not really going to trade you. We're not going to draft Kyler Murray. I don't think Cliff Kingsbury, who will be 40 in August, is that smart. Taking you a trip down memory lane, listeners. Way back in 2009, there was a young coach by the name of Josh McDaniels. He was only 32 years old at the time. He took over as a head coach for the Denver Broncos, and he floated the idea, and it got circulated, that they wanted to acquire and trade then backup quarterback Matt Castle. Ironically, Jay Cutler caught wind of that. Josh Rosen's being compared to Jay Cutler. That's why his stock dropped a little bit. It's probably why a lot of people's not wanting to offer a first-round pick for him. I think the guy's a great player. I think he's probably worth a first-round pick. He's smart. He's got a quick release. I still remember that comeback he made on Texas A&M. I would put him right up there with the other two quarterbacks, Mayfield and the quarterback they drafted by the Jets in front of him, Darnold. I would put him right there with those two. Quite frankly, there still may be a possibility, right situation, he still may be the best quarterback out of the three. But anyways, so Josh McDaniels floated the idea because he was young, he was inexperienced, he believed too much in himself at that time. 32 years old. I'm 38 now. That's a very young age. He tried to right that wrong and cover everything up and apologize. He comes out in a press conference with the Jay Cutler jersey with that smirk look on his face. Kevin, if you remember that. And the thing totally backfired. Same thing with this Cliff Kingsbury, who'll be 40 in August. He made a comment. Rosen has took down from his social media all of his Arizona, anything linking him to the Arizona Cardinals. So I do not think that him and Rosen had that private conversation. I think the cat's out of the bag. The latest of what I read on this situation today is that the Washington Redskins are the team the most interested in him. Other teams that have been interested in offering that second-round pick for Rosen are the Giants, the Chargers, and the New England Patriots. You have to make that move. If you're Arizona, time's running out. Today is the 7th. 2 weeks from Thursday will be the NFL draft. It's already out. There's already discourse between this guy and you. It's going to be hard to recap. Anybody remember going back to the McCartney and Aaron Rodgers fallout? Aaron Rodgers had a chip on his shoulder and a grudge against Mike McCarthy going back to 2005 when he was the offensive coordinator for the then San Francisco 49ers, who had the number 1 pick and drafted Alex Smith over him. So tell me that grudges by NFL players who are sensitive are not real. Joe Montana felt insecure about the rise of Steve Young. Tom Brady felt insecure about the rise in practice and the hype on Jimmy Garoppolo. So you're trying to tell me a second-year player is not going to have an issue with this talk of this guy? It's a very difficult position to be in. And if you're the management staff, the GM who fired a coach after 1 year, Steve Wilkes, and then you bring this Cliff Kingsbury in with this system, and the cat's already been out the bag. He wants this Kyler Murray guy. It's not a smoke screen. You got to make the move. We know you traded up last year in the first round to get Rosen. You got to go ahead and right that wrong now and trade him off for that second round pick or the high second round pick. You're not going to get a first round pick. I mean, we are 2.5 weeks away from this thing. I personally would give a first-round pick because I know that there's no great quarterbacks in this draft according to what the scouts are saying. Kyler Murray's not all world. I know Dwayne Haskins has been talked about. This Daniel Jones, I want to say, out of Duke. Yeah, he was well coached out by David Cutcliffe, but he's setting the world on fire. Those guys sound like projects, if you ask me. Maybe Kyler Murray gets you to the playoffs, maybe the next Doug Flutie. But that's all history now. They're going to have to make that move. Like I said, the Denver, Josh McDaniels, Jay Cutler saga ended. They traded him to Chicago for Cal Orton, and I want to say a second-round pick. The rest is history. They later took Tebow, and this guy was fired and went back. He took over for the Rams. He was fired again, and he's the offensive coordinator back at New England. So this is, and the longer you wait, the more that is going to go down. So Arizona, pull the trigger, make the trade. My opinion of Cliff Kingsbury, I feel like he showed his hand a little too early. That's one mistake. For one thing, he lost to Texas Tech in the Big 12. That's a different point. But when that story came out about him wanting to give players a 20-minute break to deal with their cell phones in team meetings, I mean, give me a break, man. You're 40 years old. I thought he was younger than that. When I looked his name up, I guess he's still technically a millennial, a few years older than a millennial. I mean, every 20 minutes, are you kidding me? It's going to be a disaster, but for someone who likes daily fantasy, I'm going to love to bet against this Arizona team. So this is going to be interesting, but you're the Arizona Cardinals. They have the problems like the new LA acquired teams are. Most of the opposing fans are going to be in your house. When you got the Chicago Bears in town like last year, it's going to be more Bear fans. When you got the Dallas Cowboys who are, whenever they play there in Arizona, you're going to have more Dallas fans there. When you got the Pittsburgh Steelers, any of these big name brand teams, Green Bay Packers and whatnot, they're all going to be there to support their team. So you got to make a splash. You got to try harder. They have a low self-esteem as an organization because it's just not a huge ingrained fan base. It's more of a transplant town in Phoenix. Nothing against the Cardinal fans, Cardinal Nation. I'm just being honest with you, okay? To scan down here on some of my comments. These quarterbacks is too shaky. Yeah, that's right, Carlos. Murray may be the real deal. He may be the next guy I just mentioned earlier, Doug Flutie. But I will say this, that next year, with Jake Fromm, the quarterback, Herbert, Fromm from Georgia, Herbert from Oregon, Tua's a little undersized, but he's taller than Murray. That's three that I know of. That doesn't count the guy that comes out of nowhere and really takes over. The year after that, Trevor Lawrence is supposed to be all-world. Someone last week said the guy from Clemson, when he comes out, may have a higher grade than a guy like Andrew Luck. I want to say Cowherd said that about a scout on his show, Colin Cowherd on his show. A scout came on his show and said that Lawrence out of Clemson may have a higher grade than Andrew Luck. Talks cheap. Let's see how he does this next year. But he had that really high grade. So that is that's 2021, everybody. But 2020, I'm giving you guys off the top of my head that are going to be. This is a weak quarterback draft as a whole. I'm just to make a chance to go out to Rosen. And I talked to Seattle about Russell Wilson. If I'm a team needing a quarterback, Russell Wilson's going to show up to work every day. He's a proven winner. He does not get hurt. He knows how to slide. He can work in any offense, especially I don't even think he has to be an RPO, run pass option offense. I think this guy could probably do He can do West Coast. He can do similar to what he did, a play action. Very smart, little undersized, but so was Drew Brees. Drew Brees, first ballot Hall of Famer. And right now, Russell Wilson is on a Hall of Fame path. I looked at his numbers. They're right. They're better than Ben Roethlisberger's. And Roethlisberger's first ballot to me. So, anyways, it is the most important. I know these are NFL stories. It is the league that drives the bus in sports talk, and that's what I want to focus my show around. That's all I have to say about that. Chop up your loss, organization of Arizona, and go out and get rid of Rosen. Go ahead and draft Murray and roll the dice. You pretty much have nothing to lose at this point. Other news. Kentucky, University of Kentucky signs Coach John Calipari to a lifetime contract. He was already making over $9 million a year. Heard a lot of pushback one way or the other. Only one championship since he's been there. He is 3305 and 71. Final Fours in 2011, 12, 14, 15. National championship in 12. Went to the Elite Eight this year. And a boatload of first-round picks. More than any other team in the NBA draft lottery. Twice as many as Duke and North Carolina, more than Duke and North Carolina combined. Has he underachieved with those lottery picks? You better believe it. But this is a business. Revenue-wise, their basketball program makes less revenue than their football program. They make about $9 million in profit. They pay him about $9 million. But here's where the but is. He brings in marketing and advertisement. He's on TV in the NBA draft. He's on TV when people watch in the tournament. He's on commercials. ESPN did a documentary on him a few years ago, and people were saying, that's a commercial for Kentucky. That's not fair. Yes, he is salesman. But you know something, everybody? Dressed for the job you want, not the job you have. John Calipari and the coach for Villanova, obviously, Mike Krzyzewski at Duke, all these guys dress to the nines. They work hard. They recruit hard. That's why I picked up my dress game on this show. He is a world-class salesman. He is a world-class recruiter. He was a better coach early on than he is now. He's more worried about getting the player in. I say that because I follow John Calipari all the way back to the mid-'90s. When he was a coach for the university, the UMass Minutemen, the teams that never done anything, led by John Marcus Camby. If any of you remember that, Marcus Camby was not a big-time player coming out of high school, but to develop as a senior into a number one overall pick. I want to say he was a top draft pick. He went to the Knicks. Very solid NBA player. But my point is, and they ironically in 1996, lost to the Kentucky Blue Devils, a Rick Pitino-led team, led by Tony Delk of all people. May have had some other stars, but I remember Tony Delk being their big point guard here. But my point is, this guy is an excellent recruiter. Money-wise, you can make the argument for the marketing, for the advertisement. Their football program's doing better under Mark Stoops. Everything is getting more, the enrollment's up. So, I'm okay with that. They gave him a 10-year lifetime contract. Basically, they're going to pay him that. The numbers annually have not leaked out, but I want to say it's probably going to stay at that $9 million 10-year extension. He's 60 years old. He would be 70. Plus, he gets an ambassador to the program job after that. That's pretty much an offer he can't refuse. They were trying to offer him $8 million. What was it? I mean, UCLA is so cheap. 6-year, $48 million, 6 times 8. They're going to pay you less money to pay more money to live in it's more expensive Southern California. That is ludicrous. But that leads me into my next person here. Bruce Pearl, everybody. $2.2 million a year with Auburn. Auburn is 8th nationally in revenue. $60 million profit from their football program. They probably should be in the national championship game. Just talked about the double dribble that did not get called from Virginia yesterday. Bruce Pearl has took three programs, tournament-wise, to places they have never been before. I did not know this. University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The team before Tennessee hired him, before the first big program hired him, Sweet 16, they've never been to Sweet 16. They haven't been back. I've never heard of them after that. Tennessee has never, I looked this up, Kevin, Tennessee has never been to the Elite Eight before Bruce Pearl. I cannot believe I'm saying this. Yes, Bruce Pearl was suspended for 3 years, had to show cause. Yes, he lied about the barbecue deal there with the NCAA, with University of Tennessee. He did work for ESPN for 3 years. If I'm UCLA, get real and pay this guy $9 million a year if you want it bad enough, if you can afford it. But if I'm Auburn, I'm saying, okay, we got $60 million we're making from football right now. And it's going up. It's like the NFL. SEC football. And here's a crazy one for you. Clay Travis looked this up last week. Kentucky football makes more than Kentucky basketball. Kentucky football makes more than Kentucky basketball. Part of that is conference play, Nike contract, all that good stuff. So my point is, Auburn, pay Bruce Pearl. Give him a massive raise, or you're going to lose it. Like I said, I know he's made some mistakes. We've all made mistakes. He's another guy. He works hard. He's passionate in what he does, and he dresses up. He has the energy. He has enthusiasm. And that is leading to success there at Auburn University, a team that barely makes the tournament. They're barely presentable in basketball, everybody. They were a laughingstock. Last time they went far was in the 80s with Charles Barkley. Barkley played there in 1984. One of my favorite basketball players of all time. He was almost in tears when they lost. But you know something? That's life in the big city. Kudos to Bruce Pearl, a coach who, one of the only few times in history that beat Kansas, Kentucky, and one other big program, and I can't remember the name of them, in one tournament. Was it Duke? No, it wasn't Duke. It was another big name program. It was Kansas, Kentucky, and I'll think of it here in just a second, everybody. Follow the money, drown in your cash. You see the adjustments in game per. Yeah, he is an excellent. Bruce Pearl is underrated in his in-game adjustments. Bruce Pearl at Auburn. I follow this every year. No McDonald's All-American. Now, that's going to change. Tennessee, Tobias Harris, a guy that's out to make a lot of money with the Philadelphia 76ers, was a Bruce Pearl recruit to Tennessee, a 5-star player that now is doing really well in the NBA. Pearl is doing more with less. Pearl won with trap, with playing trap and hurry up basketball. You can't even do that now in college, is what he said the other day. Buzz Peterson, Buzz Peterson, no, he's better than Buzz Peterson. Carlos, I believe Pearl. Remember, look how far Auburn was down when he got there. I mean, they were way down there. Ole Miss you could make the argument, Ole Miss was a better coach. You know, in other news, I know Jerry Stackhouse, a guy that I recognize more for beating up Jeff Hornacek as an NBA player, punching him in the face. Hornacek was a player for the Jazz, hitting him in the face a couple of times and lost his cool. And a guy that's being called out for being lazy by Michael Jordan than I do as a coach. That being said, probably a really good recruiter, probably a better than average assistant coach for him to get a job like Vanderbilt. We'll see how that plays out. I wasn't in love with it, my first instinct, but we'll see how it plays out with him. But Bruce Pearl, you pay him as much as you can. I don't think he's a Buzz Peterson. He's much better than Buzz Peterson. I think this guy will win a national championship eventually if the team, and they've got the money. You make $60 million in profit from football alone at Auburn. Rebuild the facilities, get better players. By the way, there's a good chance that the NBA is going to do away with this age restriction thing, go back to the players coming straight out of high school. They're going to work on the G League, so it's going to be more about coaching. It's going to be more about player development. So you're going to see more out of coaches like Roy Williams and Mike Krzyzewski. The cream will rise to the top. Guys like Bruce Pearl who figure out angles and stuff like that. Now Calipari, he's going to have to tap into his inner coach again and go back to the Calipari that I knew 20 plus years ago at the University of Massachusetts, how it played out there for him. So anyways, so pay the man again. University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, took him to the place they'd never been before. University of Tennessee, Sweet 16. University of Tennessee, Elite 8, never been there before. University of Auburn, Final Four, never been there before. If you want to go places you've never been before, hire Bruce Pearl. Okay. I'll be 38 in July. I will admit when I'm wrong about things. I've made some mistakes in life. I've lost money in real estate. I've been that young, energetic entrepreneur who was more about enthusiasm than he was about the substance of what I was going into. I made money in real estate. I've lost money in real estate. I had some trouble starting up a security company. But I'm telling you all this, I'm admitting my mistakes. I'm moving on to Charlie Ebersol, who is the co-founder and the real push behind this AAF league that collapsed the week before last. He come off to me as a very cocky guy, dismissed the idea of even merging with the XFL, which is supposed to launch a semi-pro league next year, when they were coming into play beforehand. And before this season started off, the build-up to this season, Ebersol was very arrogant. Cocky is a word I want to use from this. I looked this guy up, no business experience. His dad was a big head honcho executive over NBC Sports. He's a legend, Dick Ebersol, over NBC Sports. This is what this guy done. There's a write-up, and I want to give the credit to the Big Lead, founded by Jason McIntyre. There's a story here. 36-year-old film producer, director, no business experience, Dick Ebersol. Charlie Ebersol. That's Dick Ebersol's son. Charlie Ebersol. This is about on the Big Lead. Big Lead wrote this up a few days ago. This was on April 5th. I guess this was on Friday. Charlie Ebersol was gushing about the upstart league on Fox Sports Radio, Sports Techie, CBS Sports Radio, CBS News, Connecticut Magazine, New York Business Journal, Fox Business. I could go on and on is what this writer says. Ryan Glassapegel from the Big League writes, he says, I could go on and on finding Ebersol before the league started with this AAF startup, but he generally projected a level of confidence such that you wouldn't have thought that needed a massive bailout before the second week and shutter before the end of the inaugural season. As of March the 28th, and I looked before I started the day's program, Charlie Ebersol, after this collapse and players having to pay their own plane tickets, still hasn't made a statement. But co-founder Bill Polian was more in charge of the football side of things. Bill Polian's a former general manager, well known around the league, famously known for building Peyton Manning in the Indianapolis Colts. For you who may have not known that. This is the statement that Bill Polian says. I was extremely disappointed to learn Tom Dundon. Tom Dundon he's the owner of the Carolina Panthers hockey team that they needed a loan to make payroll that they're disputing that they needed to make. They meaning Charlie Ebersol before this close came out a couple of weeks ago. Tom Dundon has decided to, this is what Bill Polian says. I was extremely disappointed to learn Tom Dundon has decided to spin all football operations at Alliance American Football. When Mr. Dundon took over, it was my belief, my co-founder Charlie Ebersol and myself, that we could finish the season, pay our creditors, and make necessary adjustments to move forward in a manner that made economic sense for all. The momentum generated by our players and coaches and football staff had us well positioned for future success. Regrettably, we will not have that opportunity. And that $250 million was now rumored to be more like a $70 million adjustment. And this writer says, didn't Ebersol heed any of the lessons of the cautionary tale of the XFL documentary he made for ESPN? This guy is still not made a statement. The players had basically, like I said, they had to pay their own plane tickets home. And now, see, people still respect. His dad still works. His dad is 71, Dick Ebersol, still with NBC. He's still 71. A lot of the people involved here are not wanting to throw him out under the bus because they need a favor from Dad. Ebersol was a guy born on third base, and that's okay. I understand that. But man up and say, I made a mistake. I did not look in the books. It's my fault. Stop lying. There's an interview he had, and I wanted to do this, but I'm recording on 3 different devices. I want to play a soundbite on the Rich Eisen show that he said on February 22nd when they needed to make payroll in week 2. He completely changes everything, talking about when they got that Tom Condon loan. The AAL founder Charlie Ebersol cleared the error on NHL owner Tom Dundon's $250 million investment, saying that we had a problem with the payroll. He lied. He got caught in the lie, and he's hiding out. He just needs to man up and say, I'm sorry to the fans, to our investors, and for most of all, I'm sorry to the players of what I did. There's also a report out that I'm probably sure it was him, begged Vince McMahon, please buy our league. But there is a silver lining here. I like the product. It wasn't about the revenue. It wasn't about the rating, excuse me. They didn't have proper TV contract. For one thing, it was on different times on different networks. It was hard to find. They need a steady network at a steady time and have all the games come on like that. That's the best thing to do. Not try to get too far ahead of yourself. I think this guy tried to get way too far ahead of himself. He didn't know what he's doing, had no business acumen. Reverse while someone who is older, I want to say in his 50s, and that's Ice Cube and his group with the Big Three. They signed on with CBS, very similar situation. They play all their games in one stadium. Maybe they should have something like this. Think it out a little bit more. XFL, from what I understand, they have all their TV contracts lined up. They do have Oliver Luck in charge. They do have Vince McMahon, who has got much deeper pockets, and they don't have separate investors. He's the main investor. And we know that there's a thirst. We know that there's a market for it. Apparently, he can't handle that many teams. He's just going to handle the number of XFL. So I think the XFL is going to work because of the mistakes that this league's made and the fact that this league has already went under before they started. I was thinking maybe that they'll be able to merge on and do this. But my thing, Charlie, apologize, man. Be a bigger man and say that I made a huge mistake, and this is what happened. Okay, Carlos. Biggest loser in the NFL, 2 to 3 division players and coach administrators. I'll be honest, the XFL failed because the football was subpar. Watched because it was hardcore fan. Well, the thing is, I think the football was subpar, but the biggest issue was you couldn't find it on TV anywhere. And I think this lie, and I do say this is a lie, that they floated around the idea that they could not get NFL players. The Players Association did not want to use NFL rosters, and they want to officially make a developmental league. If you don't have enough players, you have tryouts to do it. They had great coaches. The speed of the game was fast. I do disagree. I do think it would have worked. You just have to have your money in order. Amazon, the most successful company, the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, did not make profit for 5 years. You have to have it set up where you have payroll and everything made for about 5 years, possibly 7 years, since this is a league. In this, I think it would work. The reason NFL Europe didn't work, it was in NFL Europe. It had crazy times. The arena football, I think it was too gimmicky. But remember, Kurt Warner also played in the Arena Football League. The XFL had Tommy Maddox, a guy that played for the Steelers. I think these things can work. I think you can't get ahead of yourself. I think you have to have realistic expectations. I think you cannot depend on the NFL, and I think you cannot compete directly with the NFL. If you do it around that, and you keep costs down, and you keep hungry players in, you're attracting good coaches. They had Steve Spurrier. They had Mike Singletary, which he was okay. You know, they had Mike Martz, a successful NFL offensive coordinator. They had guys that played in the NFL, and they had familiar players from the college game. Trent Richardson led the league in touchdowns. He was a superstar college player. It's not as good as NFL. I don't think anybody expected it with any realistic expectations to be as good as NFL, but I do think that there is a thirst. I do think it will work. Remember, the USFL did work. The problem is they wanted to go directly against the NFL in the in the fall. And here's another thing: they didn't want to use players directly out of high school. Everything is on the table. Vince McMahon saying you could sign players directly out of high school. You could sign players that's played in college for a year. Everything is on the table. If they didn't have enough players in the AAF, they simply should. You have to adjust on the fly and overcome. That was BS. I think it was a major money issue and a major problem with the power structure and too many different investors. Not enough people on the right page. What does Carlos say? Big loser in NFL. If NCAA football is not good enough and now looks more than a bunch of opportunities to cash out fully developed players, even to educate those players. People were not in the stands either. Yeah, I know. Vince McMahon put on a show. Can't count on that. Yeah, he can put on a show, bringing enough sustain. I like the XFL much better than this. I did too, my friend. And Carlos, that was from Kevin. Carlos, if Europe didn't work because it costs us outrageous developmental players and coaches. Yeah, Europe. I saw 2 Europe games in my whole life. Why? The times were way off. You could not pronounce any of the names. Here's the thing, guys. This is why college basketball don't really work. You got to have consistency. You got to have players, coaches, fan bases established. Nothing happens overnight, okay? Why does fantasy football work in college and not or in pros and not for college? Because we know who Aaron Rodgers is. We know who Tom Brady is. We know who Ben Roethlisberger is. We know who Le'Veon Bell is. There's daily fantasy for college games, but it's not a big deal. Because you cannot get a relationship. You can't get a consistent following of the players. That's what you need. It's going to be about the coaches. If you bring familiar names into the XFL and don't expect it to knock it out of the park, have a consistent TV setup where they're on the same stations at a somewhat regular time, and have an ESPN. You can follow the scores on ESPN. You can follow the scores through your whatever way you stream your internet or whatever to your phone, your devices. But TV is still king. You still have to have consistency. The same faces, familiarity, somebody to like, somebody to hate. You got to have that thing set up. If you do not have those set up, you're going to have inconsistency, and quite frankly, you're going to have people lose interest. I watched the first week because it was on CBS. Then I'm looking around all these other CBS games. I couldn't follow all that. And yes, the product is not going to be as good as the NFL. Of course not. But guess what? Nothing as good as NFL. That's what the revenue and the ratings say. The NBA, Major League Baseball, none of those generate the kind of numbers that the NFL does. Why? The NFL is very consistent. They have a good marketing set up. They have their salary cap structure set up. The coaching's really good. It's sophisticated. And they're quick to make a change of tying this all into that rule change. They're not rigid in their ways like a Major League Baseball. They don't give the players too much authority like the NBA, which that's another story. The NFL model is the best in pro sports. NFL, quite frankly, is the best show on TV, ratings-wise. So, it is what it is. But shame on you, Charlie Emersall. Grow up, man up, be a big boy, and take the hits and apologize. And quite frankly, I would refund those players for their plane tickets. I don't care how many hundreds of thousands you got to go with. This guy still ain't said nothing about this incident. So, well, guys, that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching. SoundCloud, this is going to be my first podcast. It's going to be on the SoundCloud under Sportsskope. I appreciate you guys watching this week. Ways to find me. You can find me obviously on the Sportsskope channel for YouTube. Obviously, I'm here on Facebook, my Facebook page. All these are going to be into one, which is going to be on www.sportsskope.com, launching next month. So we're putting this thing together. I believe it's all going to work out. It's a little stressful. I get a little irritated sometimes. Buying a printer last week, and getting all my technical devices. I would like to be on Periscope Live, but I just don't have a device for that. I have signal problems with Periscope, but that would be an ideal setup for me between Periscope and Twitter Live. But I am, like I said, YouTube now, SoundCloud, launching the very first ever podcast on this 7th day of April 2019. I appreciate everybody's support. All means necessary. If you like the show, please share my show on Facebook. Please share my show. Kevin, please share my show. Carlos, my Austin P Bros, man, I love you guys. Please share my show. I will be back next week, 7 p.m. Central Time. The show is usually posted on those mediums that I just mentioned, around 8 to 8:30 Central Time on Sunday night. Have a good week, everybody. I will be back next week here for Sportsskope.